Welcome to Sound Bites. Today we dive into some big conversations. First, the wild world of AI music and Spotify's role with the Velvet Sundown. Then, I'm spinning Pieces of You by Jewel in the vinyl vault and reflecting on its legacy. After that, we'll unpack the new Imperial Triumphant record in the release radar. For tea time, we're breaking down David Draymond's controversy and why real anti-Semitism isn't part of the story. And finally, a chill wild card to wrap things up. So let's get into it. Let's talk about AI, Spotify, and the strange case of the Velvet Sundown. If you've been on social media lately, you might have seen people scratching their heads over the mysterious new act called the Velvet Sundown. The band seemed to come out of nowhere, no interviews, no shows, no photos, and yet it was suddenly trending and racking up streams like a buzz band on the verge of making it big. Well, it turns out the Velvet Sundown is an AI-generated band. They changed their bio to say, this is a synthetic music project guided by human creative direction and composed, voiced, and visualized with the support of artificial intelligence. So that means from the vocals to the instrumentation to the visual branding, it's all synthetic. And while that's wild on its own, here's where it's crossing into legal lowdown territory. It's extremely likely that the AI behind this act was trained using the work of real musicians who never gave permission. We're talking about art made by blending and borrowing from real artists' voices, guitar tones, drum grooves, without their knowledge, without their consent, and without paying a dime in royalties. And Spotify, they're hosting it, promoting it, possibly even boosting it in the algorithm, while thousands of independent artists are grinding just to hit 1,000 streams. Now here's the legal problem. Copyright law hasn't caught up. There's no clear legislation about AI training data, no precedent that says training on copyrighted works without a license is illegal, but it should be. Because when Spotify profits off songs that sound like stolen patchworks of real bands, while refusing to pay those same real bands a livable rate, it's exploitation. Technically legal? Maybe. Ethically bankrupt? Absolutely. The music industry is already a tough place to survive. Now add AI bands who never get tired, never make mistakes, and never ask for fair compensation to the mix. It's worse. And they might be built on your back without you ever knowing. This is the beginning of a very slippery slope, and Spotify is skating down it fast. Lately, I found myself pulling Pieces of You off the shelf more often. Jewel's debut album, released in the mid-90s, was one of the first records that made me feel like music could be both fragile and furious. At a time when female artists were often polished and packaged, here comes this Alaskan folk singer with a beat-up guitar, crooked teeth, and songs that felt more like therapy sessions whispered over coffee. But Pieces of You wasn't just confessional. It was observational. There's a precision to Jewel's empathy that few artists have ever hit. You Were Meant for Me and Painters are like little novels. Little Sister Aches of Loss and Daddy is a spoken word grenade, part rage, part grace. This album didn't just tell stories. It cracked people open. It cracked me open. The power of this record lands even harder when you know her story. How she was homeless as a teen, how people treated her like she was invisible. She's talked about how people who wouldn't make eye contact with her, they would give abandoned animals more compassion than unhoused humans. And you can hear all of that in the music. It's not borrowed pain, it's lived in, it's raw, it's truth. And what struck me then, and still does now, is that Jewel looked human. Not this waif-thin, hyper-sexualized, just a healthy, strong woman on stage. And for that, the media called her frumpy or fat, all the usual garbage, and she stood her ground. She sold millions of records. She helped shift the idea of what women in music could look like and what they could be. So yeah, Pieces of You is sacred to me. It made me feel seen as a young girl, and I still sing it at the top of my lungs. But as I talked about last week during tea time, Jewel's recent choices, her alignment with RFK Jr.'s campaign, her presence at Bezos' weddings, and her friendships among the ultra elite, they've left me conflicted. This woman who once stood so powerfully for the marginalized now seems to be brushing elbows with the very systems that perpetuate suffering. And while I don't know what's going on with her health or personal journey, I can't ignore the way she now appears increasingly swept up in the very aesthetic and social circles she once resisted. It's hard not to see her activism as hollow, like watching someone walk back their legacy in real time. I'll never stop appreciating Pieces of You, everything it gave me and millions of other women around the world, but I also don't want to pretend that nostalgia exempts anyone from accountability. So I really hope Jewel speaks to her elite friends, especially those in positions of power, to minimize the suffering and struggle of so many, because mental health is not something that happens in a vacuum. It's very much dependent on our social systems too. And I don't think an app is going to solve our problems. It's people that she's hanging out with that could do so much to improve the world for so many people. And I hope that she uses those connections in a way that can create meaningful change for other people when she herself knows such a struggle. So look, I'm not the needle drop or metal and coffee. I have no idea how music critics crank out fully formed takes quickly after release, even if they got it a bit beforehand. I'm still over here stuck on the B-side of something that came out last year. And while I prioritize listening to music, I also need time to live with an album and really let it hit before I can have a take. Sometimes I love a release on first listen, but it's rare. Usually I need to come back when my brain is less fried and more open. That's where I'm at with the new Imperial Triumphant record. I haven't picked up a physical copy yet, mostly because I haven't been buying as much vinyl lately, and last I checked, it was sold out. But I have been listening and re-listening and sitting with it. Imperial Triumphant is one of those bands I've long appreciated, and I really respect how their songwriting has evolved. They still have that signature dissonant chaos, but there's a clear sense of melody weaving through this album. There's more classical elements that are gorgeous and a little haunting and grotesque. It feels like a continuation of Vile Luxury, both thematically and sonically, but with shorter tracks and a mix that feels more refined. Not necessarily more accessible, though. You can pick apart layers more easily. There's a standout leads, jagged transition, and those spine-tingling horn flourishes that remind you this band is just as much jazz as they are metal, maybe more. They're still nasty, still angular, but also weirdly beautiful. Lyrically and aesthetically, there's that focus on wealth, decay, and excess, and it seems like it's set in the Gilded Age, anxiety, but with blast beats. And it's not easy listening, but in my opinion, it's a lot easier to listen to than their earlier stuff. They're very locked in now. Last time I saw them live, it was basically they played the same set, but their precision, not having any count-ins cues, just pure telepathy, knowing when to come in. Or maybe they have in-ears with cues and I just don't know. Regardless, each member is an absolute monster on their instrument. And for this record, if I had to pick a favorite track right now, it'd probably be Pleasuredome. Dave Lombardo's feature probably has me a little biased, but the song just hits. It's punchy, but it's still like that early Imperial mixed with where they've gone. This is definitely a release to check out. I think it's out on Century Media Music. I'll acquire a copy eventually, but hopefully I'll get to see them live and just grab one while they're on the road. For today's tea, let's talk about David Draymond getting booed at the Back to the Beginning show and then turning around and calling it anti-Semitism. Let's be absolutely clear, anti-Semitism is real, it's dangerous, insidious, and it should always be taken seriously. That being said, criticizing violence is not anti-Semitic. You don't get to celebrate warfare and then cry persecution when people boo you. While there are plenty of metalheads who don't like Disturbed, I generally don't see them actively booing unless there's something else at play. It seems people are reacting to the fact that he signed a bomb used in an Israeli attack, one that, like so many others, actively killed civilians, including children. This is during one of the worst humanitarian crises in history, and when you make a public display like that, you can't act shocked that people respond. It's the same pattern we just saw with Sharon Osbourne, who echoed similar pro-Israel sentiments while publicly trashing the Irish rap group Kneecap. To their credit, they clapped back with one of the best responses I've seen. They invited her to revisit her husband's lyrics to War Pigs. If only Sharon would have listened to Ozzy as closely as she listened to the IDF's PR team. At the end of the day, this isn't about religion. It's about power, violence, and who gets to be held accountable. And frankly, when you're signing bombs and partying with the ultra elite, don't be surprised if the people who once celebrated your music stop cheering. To quote Charlie Day, wild card bitches. So today's wild card segment feels a little wild card because honestly I wasn't sure what I wanted to talk about or who, but here we are. Since the Back to the Beginning show happened this past weekend, I wanted to just say from what I saw, it seemed like a beautiful, fitting way to close out a legacy. Ozzy Osbourne performing what he could given his health, Kelly Osbourne getting engaged, Pantera and Jason Momoa jumping in the pit, big moments all around. I was playing a show with OC and the Jupiter, so I missed the live stream and all the hype, but the clips I caught afterward, Lamb of God's performance absolutely killed it. All the clips I've seen. It's moments like these that remind me how much music ties us together even when life pulls us in different directions, and honestly, watching legends finish chapters while new bands keep crushing it makes me grateful to be a part of this wild scene. Maybe next time I'll have a deeper hot take, but for now, just appreciating the ride. Have a good week. I'll see you next time. Oops. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, please.